Hi everyone and welcome to a new video with me, Queen Ophelia. Today we're going to be discussing and analyzing a short story called The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, and it's written by F. Scott Fitzgerald, and I recently read it and I felt like it had so many themes to discuss and it might be a long video, but I hope you're here for the ride. There's also going to be a lot of spoilers in this video, so if you haven't read it or you haven't watched the movie, because there is a movie to it, and you are wanting to read it, I do recommend that you read it first and then you come back to the video after, because it's not going to be a vague summary, because I'm really going to go into depth with this one. So I'm just warning you right now so you know. Before we get into the video and the discussion, I really want to thank my members of this channel. You have Suyurnishi, Dirge Clades, Jack Miller, and Sir Stillspear. Thank you so much for always supporting me and always being here on my channel as members. And yes, thank you. Let's get into a little bit about the book first. Then we're going to get into a summary. Then I'm going to talk about one symbol that I've seen that take place in the story. And then I have 4 themes that I think is very relevant to the story. And of course, I'm going to end on my own review and my own thoughts about it. What I think personally about the short story in the end. You can also find the different chapters down below if you want to skip some parts, or if there's something you're particularly interested right away, you can find those chapters down below if you want to see them. But without further ado, let's just get into it a little bit. The Curious Case of Benjamin Button is a short story that would be categorized into several different kind of genres. Fitzgerald as an author is very and usually associated with like a realistic narrative. And so you can see The Great Gatsby or his other works. But when it comes to the Benjamin Button short story, it's more centered on a very non-realistic element, such as the Benjamin's reversed aging condition. But because of Benjamin's magical and supernatural condition, the story could be a little bit more considered into the fantasy or science fiction genre, or even speculative fiction. It doesn't really have a specific genre like that, but it does have different kind of genres into one. When it comes to the story, it also might be a very unique in the context, because F. Scott Fitzgerald, like I said, is very associated with realistic fiction, and he usually writes about the jazz age, such as The Great Gatsby. But however, when it comes to his short stories, like The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, it's not his only magical or speculative fiction that he has written, but because he have done multiple short stories in that genre. He did like a handful of supernatural tales in a book, such as The Cut Glass Bowl, in which it's about a small glass bowl that brings bad luck and hardship for a woman and her family. There's also another one called A Diamond as Big as the Ritz, which is almost like it sounds like it's a diamond that's just as big as the size of a hotel. So he's not new to this concept, because he did make an entire book full of short stories like these. So if you have read this book or this short story and you really enjoyed it, I do recommend that you pick the anthology up and read more of his short stories, because they are lovely in its own way. It's nearly 100 years ago since this was published. And the story has become one of the best known examples of this subgenre in science fiction that you call age regression fiction. That is almost like you sound of it. It's with a character who ages but in reverse. That is, you're born old, but then you grow young. Famous writers such as Philip K. Dick or Roald Dahl, for that matter, have experimented with these premises before, but when it comes to F. Scott Fitzgerald, he was one of the first to do this, and that's why this Benjamin Button story has been one of the prime example for this subgenre. Moving on to the summary of this book. The book in a big, very vague summary would be, it's a story about a man called Benjamin Button that is aging in reverse. He's born a very old man, and then he ages numerically with numbers, but his appearance and his mental state is going down instead. So when he's a very old man in numbers and in age, he's actually looks like he's a newly born, or that he's just a few years old, as well as his mentality. But if you're going to have a longer summary of the book, it takes place in 1860 roughly. It starts with Roger Button, who is this man whose wife has gone into childbirth. He's walking towards the hospital, and he has all this expectation of what he wants his son to be. He wants his son to be a little bit of a mischievous, and he wants him to be going to Yale just like he did, and he wants him to take over the family business and all of this. But when he comes to the hospital, he's met with a doctor and the nurses being extremely rude to him. They don't want to comfort him at all. Mr. Button, he asks over and over again how his wife is doing, how his kid is doing, but all he gets in answer is that you have tarnished the name of this hospital, and go and get your kid and leave. But they can't call him a kid because he's not a kid. And it's not until he walks into to the room to see that his newly born son actually looks like a 70-year-old man. He's a full-grown 70-year-old man sitting there and just waiting for his father. But he doesn't just look like a 70-year-old man, but he also acts like one mentally. They're being told to leave the hospital as soon as possible, since the baby's unusual condition would threaten the hospital's reputation, and they don't want them to stay there for very long. For this, Mr. Button takes his son home. He has to go and get him some clothes, and in the beginning we get to see him wanting to buy baby clothes for his son, but because he's not a baby but a full-grown old man, he has to buy him a suit instead. Mr. Button has to dye Benjamin's hair as soon as they get home, and he also needs to trim his beard, and he tries to force Benjamin to live like an average kid, depending on what his actual age is, instead of what he looks like to be. But instead, Benjamin himself wants to read the encyclopedia and smoke cigars and maybe chat with his grandfather. That's what he finds to be a very more fun, loving time. By the time Benjamin turns 18, though, he runs out of hair dye when he's on his way to the university. This means that when he comes there, the registrator thinks that he's a very odd old man that's come there to make a fun of the university, and that he's sent back because they don't believe that he is at 18 and that he's going to enroll in the university. When he's on his way back to his hometown of Baltimore by train, he's met with some students that follow him and they shout insults to him, and they're telling him that he's a crazy old man and he should try to do that at Harvard instead. And on the train home to Baltimore, Benjamin decides that he will go to Harvard someday, but according to his appearance, he cannot go to Harvard now, but he has to wait until the time is right for him to do so. When he gets home again, he joined his father in his family business, which is a hardware business, and is extremely successful at this. It is when a few years later, when Benjamin is roughly 50 years old, he looks basically just like his father. They have roughly the same age, and they look almost like brothers. They start going out dancing together, and this is when he meets Hildegard, which is a young, very beautiful woman that starts dancing with him at this dance. She tells him that she really, really likes older men because she enjoys the maturity of men, just like Benjamin. And according to her, 50 is the ideal age, meaning that Benjamin right now, for her, is the ideal man. He really likes this affection that he gets from Hildegard, and it's soon that they are announced to be married. But Hildegard's father, who is very high up in society, doesn't really like this because this starts a lot of ridicule and their reputation gets really bad. And he tries to get Hildegard to stop the marriage, and all of Baltimore erupts in this big gossip about this marriage. They still get married though, and within the 15 years, Benjamin is not only the head of the company, but he's also the body and mind of a very handsome and young man. This is when the gossip ends, because this is when they start to get more into the same age as each other. Benjamin and Hildegard have a son that they call Roscoe, but Benjamin dislikes the boring family life, and the younger he gets, the more interested he gets in younger women as well, and he also feels like he's extremely restless. And he needs a thrill in life, and he needs to do something. So he joins the army and goes off to fight in the Spanish-American War. When he gets home, he's having a lot of medals for a hero and a veteran, and he have done what he wanted. But when he gets home from the war, Benjamin clashes with Hildegard because of his reverse aging. And he is growing more interested in younger women again because the clash of Hildegard. She finds it not to be fun that she as a woman gets older and he as the man just gets younger and younger, because she feels like the reputation out there is not as good. Then when Benjamin looks to be 20, he attends Harvard University like he always said that he wanted to be. He also, in the Harvard University, he enrolls in the football team, but the older he gets in numbers, the younger he gets in mentality and in body, which means that every year he gets weaker in his body, which means that the last year that he can't even make it to the team anymore because he's just getting skinnier and skinnier and smaller because he's getting younger and younger physically. But he still attends the Harvard University, and he gets to graduate like everyone else. When he have graduated from Harvard University, he moves back to his son Roscoe because his wife Hildegard have moved to Italy and she doesn't really want anything to do with him anymore. Roscoe, his son, though, is very ashamed of Benjamin and his condition, and he doesn't really want to be seen with Benjamin because Benjamin is a lot younger than his son appearance-wise. So Roscoe doesn't want him to call him son because he feels like he doesn't want everyone to know about this condition. So he asks Benjamin to call him uncle instead. When Benjamin has to go to the kindergarten, he's doing so together with Roscoe's son. So when Roscoe goes to leave his son at the kindergarten, he also leaves his own father at the kindergarten. Because at this time, Benjamin is physically and mentally in the same stage of a young child. A year after the kindergarten, his grandson, Roscoe's son, moves on to go to first grade, but Benjamin has to stay back and go kindergarten yet another year because he just gets younger and younger. When he doesn't have the ability to go to kindergarten anymore, Roscoe does not want to take care of him as a son or as his father, so he gets a caretaker that Benjamin calls Nana. And soon Benjamin slowly regressed to only having simple sensory details, like all his memory of his adult life is just gone to him. And then there's only Nana's presence, the food, and he can feel the bright sun, and of course darkness. But finally also all those things fade away to the end of the short story when his life ends as a small, newly born baby. That's roughly the summary of the story. It's the life of Benjamin Button, a person who is born to grow younger and younger and then die as a newly born baby. It's a very interesting story, and it is very worth reading, and I really liked a lot of it. Like I said in the beginning, there are some themes that I think is really important to this one, and we will get into those. But first I want to talk about one symbol that I found that was reappearing. It was twice in the story. It once in the beginning of the story and once in the end of the story. And it's the colorful paper. The colorful paper that Benjamin encounters both times he attends kindergarten, I think, symbolizes the extent of or to which people change between different phases in life. Because in the beginning of the story, he goes to kindergarten because his father, even though he looks and acts like an old man, Mr. Button still wants his son to go to school like normal children do, because technically he is a child on paper. And if you look at the social security number and what the date of birth, he is on paper a child. So he wants him to go to kindergarten. But when Benjamin first goes to kindergarten, he's an old man. He has no interest in playing with the colorful pieces of paper, and he's not really captivated by this thing. But all of his classmates are, and they love to do different cuts and play with the colors and have fun with the scissors and everything. Instead, Benjamin just finds this really, really tedious and boring, and he falls asleep while the other children are cutting shapes and having fun with the papers. This is because Benjamin is not your typical 5-year-old boy. Like, the things that entertain children simply doesn't appeal to him because he is not a 5-year-old child, even if he is on paper. But then Benjamin goes back to kindergarten in the end when he goes there with his grandson. At this time around though, Benjamin is in fact, body and soul, a child. Even though on his paper he's more likely to be 70, he is physically and mentally a child again. And this time around, he enjoys the colorful paper a lot more. Benjamin has become an actual child in body and mind, so he thinks that cutting shapes out of the paper is the most fascinating game in the world. By this, the paper itself represents the vast changes that Benjamin has undergone, highlighting just how much a person's development states affect their entire way of being and their entire identity of being. That sometimes it's about the phases and the development of those different stages in life and how they affect you and your identity and your development, rather than looking at a number on a paper saying he's 5 years old. Because like we said in the beginning, even if he was 5 years old, he didn't act and was like a normal 5-year-old. Instead, he was 65. Roughly. And it's very interesting, and you can talk about the 4 themes that I could find and that we can really talk about on this book or short story is age, development, and identity. The second one is support and caretaking. Is also one that's very important, I think. You have, of course, scandal, gossip, and reputation. And fourthly and last, we have the expectation and acceptance of being different. These are the 4 themes that I could find. There's probably a lot more you can talk about. But these are the ones that I found to be most relevant when I read it. If you want to listen to a specific chapter, you can go down below and go directly to that one. Otherwise, I will just get into it. The first one that we're going to talk about is age, development, and identity. Because when it comes to Benjamin's development stages, it has a huge impact on his identity. His entire personality seems to change depending on what chapter in life is, rather than what his actual age is. We can see this in the 4 different stages of the actual short story. The first one is when he is on paper a child, but in body he's an old man, and he behaves accordingly by wanting the kind and calm reverse that often associate to an old person. He also wants to smoke his pipe, and he wants to hang out with like-minded people, like older people, instead of playing with the younger children. Secondly, we have when he's in middle-aged, when he's 50, he becomes more engaged with life, leaving behind his slower personality, and he gets more engaged and wants to do more with his life. Then thirdly, by the time he has the body and mind of a man in his 20s, he's desperate to find excitement in life, and he gets really restless, acting like a fun-loving young person does, and he wants to chase girls, and he has so much energy and so much life in him that he wants to do. And then near the end of his life, he's finally becoming the little boy. He leads the carefree existence of like an innocent child, basically. And these 4 are the 4 stages that you can really find and see in this short story. And the first one, it means Benjamin doesn't really just change physically, but he does change mentally. His transformation through the story suggests that while age is an arbitrary number, that doesn't necessarily impact a person's identity. And actually, development stages do profoundly affect the way that a person moves through the world. And especially these 4 stages that we have up here that we talked about. And when he was a newly born, he complains about the noise to the nurses, and he's a very old, grumpy man. He's neither his body nor his mind is babyish. Like, he's just a few hours old, yet he's complaining to the nurses about the noise of the other children screaming, and he doesn't really like the cradle that he was given, but he wants a rocking chair instead, because that will be more comfortable for him to sit in. In keeping with this, you have Benjamin's identity is to affect by his development stage that is seen inauthentic when he tries to act his numerical age, like when he's a child, for instance. You have when he tries to satisfy his father by breaking things every day. His father wants him to be a child, and he wants him to be a mischievous child, because when it comes to paper and his numerical age, he's supposed to be 5 or 6, and he's supposed to break glasses or break toys or whatever. But Benjamin himself, he just wants to sit around and read or, smoke tobacco or whatever, because he's an old man. His physical age feels in his body, and he doesn't really want to play because he's in pain. That's what his body is like. But when it makes his father happy, he wants to do those things for his father. So he starts behaving like a child, even though he's not a child mentally or physically. But even if you see that he's doing this, even though he's changing for his dad to be and act more like a child, it doesn't actually change his personality, because his personality is more shifted because of his development and because of his more mental and physical change. So even if he tries to act his age, he doesn't change his actual identity or development. But even though Benjamin Transform is very unique in a sense, it represents a core truth about humans, that in each phase of a person's age-related development, their whole identity tends to drastically shift depending on where we are in life. Of course, everyone naturally changes as they go through life, and some changes differently than others, and we don't all have the same experiences, and we don't all mature at the same age, and so on and so on, and it has many factors to it. But it's given extra attention to Benjamin because it's a reversed way. We can really see how important development is to your identity, where you are in life. And sometimes your age is just a number when it comes to certain things, especially when it comes to identity. Then it has to do more about what development and phase you are in life than anything else. Another theme that I think is important and we can talk about is, like I said before, support and caretaking. Because one of the most tragic things when it comes to Benjamin Button's life is that nobody actually supports or cares about him in a meaningful, normal way. From the moment that he is born, the very people that is expected to comfort him and ease him into the world and teach him about the world and people is his parents, but also the nurses at the hospital. But we are witnessing that everyone is focusing solely on the condition itself and talk more about the condition than really anything. Mr. Button doesn't necessarily give Benjamin the kind of unconditional love and support that you might be expecting from a parent or a father. And the same lack of support is evident in Benjamin's eventual relationship later on with his wife Hildegard, who abandons him later on because she can't accept that he's getting younger when she's getting older. And even when the years go on, Benjamin needs more and more support because he loses maturity because he gets younger and younger rather than gaining maturity like a normal human would do. But he lacks that caring relationship with a family or a friend, which means that by the time he's a little boy, he has nobody to accept him, not even his own son Roscoe. And even Roscoe then fails Benjamin the emotional support that he needs in life. Meaning that through all his stages in life, he has no one to support him or care for him in an unconditional way that you would think a family member would. The curious case of Benjamin Button is thus like a story how lonely it is to live without a supporting relationship that normally help people navigate through life. You normally would. In the beginning, you see like Benjamin Button as a child. His parents, they provide him with food and shelter and clothing, but also financial stability. But they don't necessarily give him and nurture him or give him legitimate like emotional support to help him through things. There is this one scene when they walk home from the hospital, because Benjamin is an old man, he can already walk and everything. Mr. Button takes his son and they're going to walk home. On this walk, Benjamin asks his father what his name is going to be, because he have not been given a name, nor has his father really looked at him, because his father is so occupied with the condition and what people will say and what they will gossip about that he doesn't actually see his son. And not only that, but even after he was given his name, he is the one that reaches for his dad's hand instead of his dad reaching for his son. And I feel like that's also a very clear scene for their relationship through the entire short story, that Benjamin tries so hard to reach for a hand or a help or like a family member to unconditionally love him, but everyone is so occupied with the condition and everything surrounding it that they doesn't really actually see him in that moment. Another thing is that Mr. Button calls Benjamin by Mr. instead of his son or another pet name that you would give your family member. So he keeps calling him Mr. Button as well, or Mr. Benjamin, instead of seeing that this is my son. He's seeing him more like an equal old man, especially when they both hit the same age of 50 and they look like two brothers next to each other. That's when he really starts, acting like they are brothers rather than father and son. Mr. Button is very occupied or preoccupied with Benjamin's unique medical condition, that there is a very clear emotional distance between him and his son, which ultimately depriving Benjamin of a fully engaged father figure in his life, because he doesn't really have a father figure. He has more a brother in his life, kinda. Later on in life, you have his wife. She resents him for getting younger, which makes it hard because Benjamin can't really... He's not aging reversed on purpose, and that's not something that he can change about himself, because that's something that he is. He can't really stop the process. This is just his condition. At this time of the life, though, you see Benjamin is not really the best spouse either, because he's out wanting to have a carefree life. He wants to go out dancing. He's getting younger and younger, and his maturity is just slipping away the younger he gets, and he wants younger girls, and he's out dancing and he's out doing other things. So he's not the best spouse. So there's a lot of things that's gnawing on the marriage with Hildegard. But when he becomes less and less interested in Hildegard as he gets younger, and in keeping with this, it also stops considering how his actions is or what his action is going to make her feel like, because he starts wanting a younger girl that's roughly the same as him, because when he gets like 20, of the mind of a 20-year-old, he wants a 20-year-old and not like an older woman. But at the same time, though, it doesn't take away the fact that Hildegard is refusing to stand by Benjamin no matter what, and through sickness and everything. So Hildegard still leaves him, and she doesn't fully actually love him the way that he wants to be loved, or understand him or his condition. So once again, he finds himself having to go through hardship without any meaningful emotional support by her being there. Eventually, though, Benjamin experiences a role reverse when it comes to his own son, Roscoe, because when he gets home from Harvard University, he's getting younger and younger, and he has to move in with his son, who then becomes his caregiver or caretaker. But Roscoe doesn't really want to take care of his father, meaning that he is yet another one of Benjamin's loved ones that fails to give him that affection that he so really need and want in life. And this we have a lot of, actually, in today's society, a lot of adult children who doesn't take care of their elderly parents, some of who can act and need the same kind of attention, almost like a helpless child. And this when Benjamin's story invites readers to reflect on the way that caretaking roles can come to a full circle. In the case of you as a father take care of your son, but then when you get older, your son will also take care of you. But here we see Benjamin taking care of Roscoe when he's a child, but when Benjamin himself becomes a child and Roscoe is an adult, he doesn't want to take care of his father, but instead he gets a caretaker to take care of Benjamin, which give Benjamin nobody in his entire life to ever provide him with true support. It's very fitting that in the end he dies without anyone but a hired nurse, Nana, to comfort him when he passes away. It's a very sad ending, but it's also very fitting to everyone who has left him and not been there for him his entire life either. Another theme that we can see in this book is reputation, gossip, and scandal. Something that is very, very clear in the story is that everyone has such a big thing when it comes to gossip and scandal. Baltimore seems to be a very high society place during this story takes place. Everyone seems to want to find a gossip and a scandal that they talk about all the time. The Buttons family is supposedly be up in high society, and they are this that makes it a bit of like a big mountain when it comes to Benjamin Button's condition, because they are in such a high position in high society. They have like a bigger reputation to uphold, which makes the gossip and scandal a lot more juicy. Mr. Button himself spends more time worrying what will destroy the family's reputation than actually taking care of his son, like we talked about in the other theme. We also have the doctors and nurses who delivered Benjamin, and they are so afraid about the reputation of the hospital that they just want Mr. Button to take his son and leave the hospital as soon as possible, because they don't want to be associated with this birth at all. The reactions validates that Mr. Button's fear that Benjamin is going to bring dishonor to the family, because if the hospital is reacting like this, the rest of the society is also going to react like this. And he's so afraid of everything that's going to go on in Benjamin's life, not because he's afraid of Benjamin's well-being and being an outcast and an outsider, but he's really afraid of the reputation of the family name. That is what he frets the most. Benjamin, he grows up, people will and did continuously spread malicious gossip about him and his condition. And even if it did give him a harder life and hardship, you have the saving grace of nobody ever actually remembers the gossip from yesterday. What is yesterday's hot tea and hot take is not today's hot tea and hot take, because today we have something else to gossip about. So the lying dormant until something else comes along and kicks up a new scandal, you're going to be through hardmanship. But sooner or later, people will forget this and they will move on to something more juicy or something newer in life, which is one of the saving grace of this Benjamin case. This also suggests that gossip can be deeply hurtful and tarnish a person's reputation, but it will also always be short term. It isn't worth worrying about in a long term because it's bound to fade away. People will not remember what happened yesterday when it comes to the higher society. And it will be hard maybe now, but it will not be hard later on. And it's just something you have to stick out. In the world of the story, the idea of losing face in society leads to the kind of like hysterical fear, as people act like nothing could be worse than to have a bad reputation or not have a good face outwards. And like their reputation is everything. It seems like the society of Baltimore, especially in this short story, is perceived to be a very scary thing, which is very unfortunate for Benjamin, because this obsession with status, when it runs through the Baltimorean society, is so deep that Mr. Button care more about the reputation of the family than his own son. There is one scene, again, when he's walking home with Benjamin, he takes his newly born son and he walks home with him on the street of Baltimore. Mr. Button is more faced and terrified that an important person or someone in the high society will see them. And just the thought about this makes him feel an idea of grotesque and appalling, because the way he looks at his son is apparently something to be very disgusted by, because it's such a fear of tarnishing your reputation, which is very sad in itself. You can also see it when Benjamin wants to marry Hildegard, and her father, General Monsif, he cares a lot more about family's reputation and what people will gossip about the family, with Hildegard wanting to marry this, not just an old man, but an old man with this condition. And he doesn't really care about his daughter's happiness in the end. So he tries everything to convince Hildegard not to follow her heart and marrying Benjamin. And he did it over and over again. And once again, an obsession with reputation negatively impacted Benjamin's life. They still ended up getting married, but there's still that hardmanship of the obsession with the reputation and how negatively rooted it is in Baltimore and this society. And although it hurts Benjamin throughout his life and he had hardmanship and a lot of gossip and reputation did stand in his way for things, we also have when it came to him wanting to go to jail like his father, and he went to jail and they ridiculed him for not looking like he was supposed to look like, because he was 20 on paper, but he did not look like 20. And they didn't want him to be there because they were scared of their reputation, of, like a school, to have an old man being in jail, and they could not see that happening. And although he had all this hardmanship, it suggested that no matter what people obsess over, things like status and reputation, people inevitably will forget. Even the juiciest of gossip, people will forget. Especially when you see that Benjamin died alone with his strange condition, but nobody at that time remembered his condition or knew about him or remembered anything about all the gossips that was ever told about him. They just saw a child, a young newly born child, die. So in the end of his life, everything and all the gossip that had been said about him was long forgotten, and nobody even remembered what his condition had been. The last one of the themes that we have is also one of the ones I find to be most interesting, is the expectation and acceptance of being different in life. I feel like when it comes to this story, even if you can't relate to, I mean, nobody can relate to being born and aging in reverse, but I think we all can, at some degree, feel like we can relate to expectations and being accepted for who you are or what you are, and that you can't always make people happy in life. You can't always make everyone happy all the time, and there's so many expectations on you from your family, from society, from your work and everything, and you can't make everyone happy all the time. And sometimes you're trying to make everyone happy, but that makes you lose who you are as a person, and you just want to be accepted for who you are in reality. And we also have that theme here in this short story. For Benjamin Button, he was born with this condition that causes him to age backwards, and that means that constantly having to behave the way that other people think that he should, instead of how or who he is as a person. And one of the biggest ones is that his father wants him to play the part of a dutiful firstborn. He wants his son to be like, he wants him to act like a child, and he wants him to act his age, even if he doesn't look like his age. Then you have society, who wants him to act according to his physical appearance, which is often out of step with his actual age. So for example, when he's 5 years old, his dad wants him to act like a 5-year-old. But society see him as a 65-year-old old man, and his mentality and his physical is 65. So society wants him to be that. And for Benjamin, it will be hard to do both, because you can't really do both. So Benjamin tries to navigate these different expectations of him, and he ends up with very little room to live the life that he wants. At least without disappointing certain people or someone in his life that he really cares about. By highlighting this like double bind, the story implies that people shouldn't focus too much on what other people expect of them and what other people want of them, since doing so is ultimately futile. Instead, people ought to live life on their own terms and do what they want to do with their life and do what makes them happy in life. Mr. Button expectations basically ignores reality, since he wants Benjamin to act a way that are completely out of touch of who he is. For example, Benjamin's condition is both physical and mental. So it's not just that he looks like to be an old man, he is an old man. Meaning that he can't just be a child. But his father insists that he acts like a little boy and his age, and he's focusing on having him have play dates with other younger children. No, he doesn't gain anything from it, because to him it's to be with a grandchild at that age. He doesn't really connect with the children, and he doesn't really want to play with the children. But he does it because he really, really want the acceptance from his father, and he wants to make his dad happy. There's also this scene when his dad comes home and he have a baby rattle, and he orders Benjamin to play with it because that is what a newly born baby would do. They would play with the rattle. And he demands what seems to be very ridiculous to both us as readers, but also for Benjamin. But while Benjamin just wants to maybe be an old man and smoke and read the encyclopedia and talk to other older people, but he does it because he wants his dad to be happy. Later though, we have Mr. Button, who makes Benjamin play with the children, like I said before, because he wanted them to have a connection, and if he thought that if Benjamin was with children his own age, numerical age that is, he would start acting more like a child. One day Benjamin accidentally breaks a window, and his father is ecstatic and super happy about that, because that is the kind of stereotypical little boy behavior that he wants to see from Benjamin. From this point on, we can see that Benjamin starts breaking things and breaking windows and toys just because it's expected of him from his father, but also because that will make his father happy. Then we have this society as a whole who is granted that he will behave like whatever age he appears to be, which isn't as a whole like a big much of trouble, because that is who Benjamin generally feels like he is, and he wants to be more like what society demands of him. But he often finds himself torn between the expectation from his father, who wants him to act like his numerical age, while everyone else wants him to act like his physical and mental age. And again, you can't please everyone at once. And in this way that he is forced to act his age, and wanting to make his father very proud and happy, one of the things that Mr. Button really wants for his son is to go to Yale University like he was. And in jail, Benjamin is then faced with the very brutal reality that not everyone sees him as an 18-year-old man or boy, because he doesn't look like an 18-year-old man, but he looks like he's more roughly 50 or 60. By simply trying to satisfy his father and being what his father wants him to be and going to the same university as his father wants him to be, Benjamin is forced into being humiliated and degraded in this situation when it comes to the university, and how they laughed at him to leave the registration, not believing he's actually 18. Another thing that we see is that his wife Hildegard, she makes it very clear to him that she is enjoying older men because she likes how mature the men are, and men in the age of 50 is the ideal age for her when it comes to maturity. And because she marries him for maturity, it is the fact that he's gradually losing his maturity means that he's increasingly fails to be the person that she expects him to be. She wants him to be this older, mature man, but the more years they're spending together, the younger he gets, both mentally and physically, also losing the maturity that she loves about him. And this far meaning that yet another person in Benjamin's life that he has a relationship suffers due to his inability to live up to the other person's expectations of him, and he can't be that person for them, and they don't accept him for who he is. It's not until Benjamin is very, very young, and he's a very young child, that he gains happiness and full happiness for the first time. He is, when everyone simply accepts him for who he is and who he wants to be, a child. This is because he stops trying to be something he's not, and he just can be and act like a toddler all he wants. Nobody tries to force him into being anything more than just a child. The fact that this is seemingly the happiest period of Benjamin's life is very, very tragic, and it just illustrates how pointless it is to try to comfort both society's many expectations and people's expectations they have on you. And it's impossible to do and be everything everyone wants from you. And it's better to just follow your own dreams and your own happiness for your own well-being and having a long and happy life. I didn't know that the story was going to be this sad, to be honest. We will get into my thoughts of the short story now. I really, really like this one. I read it because I'd seen the movie. And many who have seen the movie and you listened this far, you might be, that does not sound at all like the movie actually. And it's not. They took the idea of the story and they did their own things on it. I think the movie was made 2008 or something. But it doesn't actually follow the same storyline like this book or a short story is, but they have the same kind of themes and the same kind of questions that you can discuss about it. And you can have the same discussion on the movie because it has that core idea of someone who is aging backwards. But I picked this up and I think that I like the movie a lot, but I feel like this short story was so different and it was a lot sadder than the movie was. And they're both good in their own ways. But that was why I picked it up in the first place, and I needed something shorter to be in between my reads, and it just felt like a great place to start. If you want to read a classic, but you don't want to dive into something too deep or something crazy or long for that matter, because a lot of classic literature is very long. This is a good start, and this is a good story to dive into. I feel like the themes are very, very interesting, and it's very relevant when it comes to expectations and acceptance and what society wants of you as a human, even if we can't relate to the same condition as Benjamin Buttons have, we can still relate to the fact that no matter at what time points in life, we still have the inability of society not accepting everyone, or you can't be who you want to be, and in different situations you have to be someone else. And I feel like this short story will always be very relevant for society and for people. And it's just overall a really, really good read. It's very well written. One of my favorite classical literatures are actually The Great Gatsby. I don't think I've made a movie on it yet. I haven't made a video on it yet. But I really want to. It's one of my favorite reads ever. And it's something we do need to discuss maybe. And that is why I wanted to read this. I actually didn't know it was the same author, Scott Fitzgerald, had made this one. So when I saw it was the same author, I was really, really intrigued. And I'm really happy I picked it up because Scott Fitzgerald, he's really, really good in his way of describing human emotions. And like this short story, even though it's a short story, it has so many emotions. Like there were scenes where you laughed because it was funny, and there were scenes where you didn't understand and you got irritated by both Benjamin, his father, Hildegard, society as a whole. And then you have scenes like the ending and how everyone just left him and he didn't ever get that fully acceptance and unconditional love, which is sad. So even though it's like a short story, it has so many impactful and so many emotions entwined into it, and it's just, to me, it's a masterpiece, and I really, really liked it. So for me, it was a 5-star read. It really was. It really was. I really, really, really liked it. That is my thoughts on A Curious Case of Benjamin Button. An interesting read about acceptance, about being who you want to be or being who you feel like you are. Also sad about, like, you know, of not taking care of your elderly, not taking care of your loved ones, not taking care of your children. There's so many impactful things in this story. It's just interesting. Also, like, the idea of development and different stages of your life, instead of like following the numeric how your age is. Instead of talking about, oh, he's 5 years old, so this is who he is, you talk more about this is the stage of life he is because of blah, 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 blah. It's also very interesting and very relevant as well. But yeah, this for being a short story, it was a lot to dive into, a lot to discuss, a lot to talk about. And I'm sorry for a very long video. If you're still here and still listening, thank you so much for listening to my analyzing and my rambling about this book, and much love to you, and I hope I will see you next time on the next video. Bye bye.